a housekeeping announcement panel of the program on the Amazonian cultural context of ayahuasca, in which our panelists are going to present their perspectives on the ecological issues of ecological and cultural preservation and the threats to the ecology and the cultures of the rainforest, and how ayahuasca practices are involved and interlinked with those threats and with possible solutions and initiatives that could help ameliorate that situation. I see Eduardo coming, so Ken Symington is going to chair. So.
Well, yesterday I told you my idea of what were the conditions for a good ayahuasquero, how to select a good ayahuasquero. And the conditions for selecting a good panel member is that they be present. That's the only condition. we have them all present. So, as Ralph mentioned, the idea of today's panel is to explore a little bit the connection between ayahuasca and the cultural environment around the Amazon, and also the connection between ayahuasca and the ecology, the ecological environment. Is this loud enough? Can you hear? Okay. So the way we thought we might structure this would be simply to ask each panelist to speak for about 10 minutes in anything that their position regarding these two connections, ecology and culture. After each panelist speaks, then we'll open up the floor to questions, and I suggest we leave the questions after everybody's spoken. That way we control our time a little better. And we have, I believe, a couple of hours, something like that, Ralph. So we have plenty of time, and maybe we ought to do it in the order in which they're listed in the program and in which they're seated here. So I'm going to ask first Jose to come up and to give us a little bit of his comments on how ayahuasca relates to culture and ecology. Don't need this. I will voy a traducir. Hablaré ahí y yo hablo de acá. Habla aquí. Eso. Aquí hablar directamente sobre la cultura y ecología. ¿Cómo afecta la ayahuasca a la gente?
En la década de los 80, el gobierno peruano, con nuestro expresidente Alan García, él pudo pertenecer al gobierno, al Ministerio de Salud, todas estas prácticas de la ayahuasca, de la medicina tradicional. Gracias a este gobierno, ¿no?, que en Perú fue formalizado en el Ministerio de Salud las prácticas de la medicina tradicional y de la ayahuasca, con una ayuda del doctor Fernando Cabieses. Entonces tenemos una gran ventaja, ¿no?, que yo creo que es uno de los países que está considerado o es legalizado la medicina tradicional y además las prácticas de la ayahuasca y de otras plantas de poder, ¿no?
So he says that in Peru, in his experience during the decade of the 80s, with the government prior to the existing one now, largely through the Ministry of Health, ayahuasca was more or less accepted as a traditional medicine practice or procedure, and that things have been pretty well recognized, and they don't have any problem with the government intervention regarding ayahuasca since that time, because prior to that there had been some control of ayahuasca and some police action against practitioners and ayahuasqueros, but not since the 80s. ¿Cómo afecta a la gente la ayahuasca? La gente en Pucallpa. ¿Qué piensan de la ayahuasca, por ejemplo?
Bueno, voy a hablar un poquito de mi experiencia o los trabajos de investigación que hice en la zona de San Martín y después en Pucallpa. En la zona de San Martín, el ayahuasca hace 20 años atrás fue muy bien visto, pero a hoy está un poco mal visto también, ¿no? Por una sencilla razón, o sea, por la migración de culturas, de la cultura serrana a la cultura selvática, ¿no? Entonces ha habido un rompimiento, una fracción que bueno, es difícil un poco explicarlo eso.
Bueno, originally, I've worked in the province of San Martin, which is essentially central Peru, and later on in Pucallpa in the south. And in my experience, whereas ayahuasca was, and I'm referring now to the way people think about ayahuasca in the cultural context, and whereas ayahuasca was more or less seen well and with a benefit, and as something quote unquote good. Lately, that's changed somewhat adversely because of the large immigration of the mountain people, of the Andean people, into the jungle. And ayahuasca is essentially a jungle product, a jungle procedure, and it's not used, it doesn't grow, and of course it doesn't get practiced or used in the mountains. So there's been a lot of migration of people from the mountains into the jungle areas, into the San Martin, the central area. And the mountain people don't consider ayahuasca as a desirable thing, and they sort of tend to look down on it a little bit as something not good, so to speak.
En mis pesquisas que podía hacer, por ejemplo, hubo una depredación. Y si uno va e investiga en esa zona de San Martín, casi ya no se encuentra ayahuasca. Y también el uso de la ayahuasca. Yo creo que por esa migración que hubo, ¿no?
So the use of ayahuasca in that area in San Martin province has decreased. And the second part of that is that because of population pressure, essentially, a lot of the forested areas of San Martin have been deforested. The forests have been cut down. So it's becoming increasingly harder to find ayahuasca growing in San Martin, which is central Peru.
Y ahora que estoy en Pucallpa, o sea, voy a contar un poco mi experiencia por la zona de Lucayali. Desde mi punto de vista, ¿no? También se está muriendo mucho esa cultura ayahuasquera. También por la migración cultural y turística y todo, ¿no? Eso es lo que yo veo, ¿no?
Then several years ago, I moved down to the southeastern part of Peru, which is in Pucallpa. And then there, since I've been there, I've noticed also some decrease as well in the use of ayahuasca and some decrease in the availability. Namely, you have to go farther out from the towns in order to locate ayahuasca vines.
Voy a comentar una de mis experiencias que trabajé con un grupo shipibos. Para mí fue muy triste sentir de ese lado. Fue con un grupo de Guillermo Arévalo, ¿no? Ese grupo shipibo. Estuve un mes con ellos. Lo que me pidieron a mí era que yo preparara la ayahuasca, que yo iría a buscar el ayahuasca, y ellos ya como no interesados en esas prácticas, ¿no?
For example, just to let you know an experience I had not too long ago, I went and spent a month with the Shipibos, which is an indigenous group of people, one of the nations in the Amazonian and the Peruvian Amazon. And I spent a month with them working with ayahuasca, and I began to notice that they were sort of looking up to me to go find the ayahuasca, to go prepare the brew, and actually even to lead the ceremony. So they were looking up to me, basically because the ayahuasca, that was a tradition of the Shipibos as one of the nations that used the ayahuasca. They're sort of like no longer familiar with it. They're losing the essence of it. They don't know how to prepare it. They don't know where the vine is. And it's something that it's just receding in daily practice.
Entonces me decían para yo ir a curarlos, ¿no? Lo cual yo estaba pidiendo para que ellos me enseñen, pero bueno, tuve que yo mismo ir con ellos a buscar, enseñar las plantas, esto, lo otro, y me pareció un choque muy, muy fuerte, ¿no?
So in effect, I was going to spend time with them to learn their practices and how they used ayahuasca, and I was like shocked or surprised or overwhelmed by the fact that it seemed to be the reverse, that they were looking to me, an outsider, to teach them how to use ayahuasca.
Y en el aspecto turístico, ¿no? Que es duro, ¿no? Verlo, por ejemplo, en la zona de Iquitos, cómo se ha comercializado esta planta tan sagrada, que uno va y la encuentra en el mercado como si comprara una Coca-Cola, ¿no? Y entonces eso duele mucho.
And that it is painful for me to see the effect of tourism on ayahuasca practice. That, for example, in a place like Iquitos, the ayahuasca brew has been commercialized to an incredible degree, to the point where now you can buy ayahuasca in a corner stand by the bottle, and it hurts me to see the commercialization of a sacred plant like this one.
Entonces hay muchas propagandas ayahuasqueras, van muchos grupos americanos, ¿no? Se los digo, porque es así. Lo siento que como se van a hacer su trip, pero yo siento no a profundizar. Entonces están matando de una manera esa medicina tan sagrada, ¿no?
So in the same vein, ayahuasca tourism is hurting the practice because many groups, most of them frankly American, go down and experience the plant in commercialized venues. not following traditional or sacred practices. So I see them as experiencing the plant in a surface manner, superficially, but not really going deeply into the sacred experience that ayahuasca represents. Thank you, Jose.
Gracias.
Well, you've heard it from Jose, which is a prime exponent of ayahuasca practice in a traditional way, and maybe I ought to interject a positive comment to all of this, maybe. And one of this is that the one mentioned by, I think Taussig mentioned in his book, the shamanism, colonialism, and terrorism, or what have you. But anyway, what he said is ayahuasca practice changes. It evolves like anything else. It's not like it's a fixed, stable, unchanging thing. It's not written in stone. And ayahuasca practice changes, and now, for many years, ayahuasqueros have been seeing UFOs and flying saucers and all that, which is really not part of the ayahuasca traditional culture, and yet the practice has evolved, it has adapted, and you might also consider that whereas the original practice of ayahuasca was devoted to maybe the hunt and to divination, now it's become more in healing, directed to healing, because the culture demands healing rather than hunt or divination. So the practice evolves too, and maybe some of these changes may not be totally negative. So anyway, now we'll hear from Connie Grod's experience in regarding culture and ecology.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Jose. When Ralph asked me to talk at this conference, and I prayed what was the essence of what needed to be talked about here in the conference in general, what happened in my dreams were the conservancy issues came first, much over what I talked about yesterday. There is, what I'm trying to relay to you is there's a huge emotional charge within me over this issue. Surprisingly so. Surprisingly so. I say that because in my rational daily working mind, I tend to be one of these folks that says, didn't we save the rainforest 10 years ago? Didn't we buy enough rainforest bars and Brazil nuts? Haven't we done that? And of course the answer is no, we haven't. And I was thinking a lot about why that is. I think for most folks, they can kind of get on the bandwagon over rainforest conservancy from afar because they don't have any direct unknowing, unconscious, direct relationship to the rainforest. Of course, ultimately we all do, but the point of the matter is in their daily lives, it's not in front of their face. So what happens is for a while it becomes, recycle plastic and save the rainforest. And for a while we buy Brazil nuts and rainforest power bars. And then somehow it fades away to yesterday's topic, but it isn't in my heart. It's in my blood. And that's what I'm talking about, it being in your blood and relationship. It was what I was talking about being spirited yesterday. And what I'm here to say on this topic early on in our discussion here is the fact that this audience has more than any group on the face of the earth a direct relationship and a responsibility. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the topic of ayahuasca in the rainforest and the spirits that live there. People, the indigenous people, and the other plants. Certainly, what I'm trying to say is that spirited relationship, we've been talking about spirited medicine from spirited healers. Yet the point of the matter is that that commands us to take action, to care for, to really be involved with rainforest and ayahuasca and indigenous conservation. Certainly, on another level, as a pharmacist, for example, a recent study showed that 25% of all of our current pharmaceuticals dispensed off of our pharmacy shelves still come directly from plant sources. And half of those come from tropical rainforest sources. So certainly on a very pharmaceutical, medical level, we all know about quinine and curare. Anybody here who has had surgery owes the rainforest for curare, tubocurarine. If you haven't had surgery, a friend, relative, or neighbor has. Madagascar periwinkle for cancers. Those of you whose lives have been touched by cancer owe it to the rainforest for some of our very powerful pharmaceuticals. And certainly modern herbalism these days, my goodness, Pau d'Arco, Cat's Claw, and Sangre de Grotto are amongst the top 13, 10, and 8 sellers of herbs in America today. So there's a resurgence of interest even in herbs. So the rainforest is reaching out desperately in need of saving and looking at. And we who have had that spirited connection or are feeling that we should have, or we wouldn't be sitting here, that spirited connection we owe. If we've had sacred experiences with something, it's about relationship. It's about when something happens, that's where the magic is. When two or more are gathered in the name of healing, it begins to happen. When you engage in a relationship with rainforest or its plants, it happens. It's in your blood. You know, yesterday when I talked about Don Antonio and the shaman I worked with and his medicinal plants and healing, you know, even on a very basic level, when I go down there and I've had many physical diseases as well as that need healing from him, as well as emotional and spiritual. But some of the times when he does healings on me, sometimes he gives me herbs. We go out straight into the rainforest and we pick these wonderful, aromatic, green, fresh plants and make them into medicine right there on the spot. It's just a delight. It's so filled with the energy of live plants. You can sense the difference. And I had asked him after several years of many healings and several incidents and episodes, how he knows whether he should heal with plants or spirit. We've been talking a lot about spirit here. But what about the plants, and certainly ayahuasca? But I said, how do you know whether you should give me herbs or whether you're going to do an icaro or whether you're going to do an ayahuasca session? He said, I always give the plants first. It's very important that you have a lot of vegetal, a lot of plants in your bloodstream. It's that which fortifies you and nourishes you from within. That's absolutely necessary. So he said, whenever possible and appropriate, I give the plants first. If we don't have time, if it's of a spiritual nature, or whatever the other reason might be, then I go straight for the spiritual healing. But it's the plants need to be in your blood. Therein begins the healing relationship. And that's what happens with the ingestion of ayahuasca as well. It's in your blood. You become made of it and you carry its spirit. So not only the pharmacology of the plant, but its spirit lives within you. That's what's brought us here to speak from that platform here this weekend. In this relationship, then, that we owe back to the plants and the spirits, certainly in my personal case, as well as many of yours, I'm sure if we heard your individual stories, is there becomes a second level of relationship that develops, and that's one with the spirits themselves. Those spirit doctors have become colleagues of mine. I would no longer think of trashing their place of work than I would burning down the hospital I've worked in. I would no more than think of allowing anyone else, for example, to harm my personal physical sister up in Minneapolis or her family. They have become my family as well. I couldn't imagine desiccating the rainforest to the point where these beings did not exist anymore. They're my friends and I care emotionally. I have a deep connection and relationship with them. My family and my life and my colleagues and my friends have definitely increased in number just simply by the number of apparitions that have appeared in my life. But on a more serious note then, what is this and how do we do this and how do we conserve and what are some of the ways? So what has come to me in all of this is the very simple, most obvious way in my case and the people that I work with is taking a look at Don Antonio and his situation himself. I showed you the film clip yesterday from the documentary, fortunate enough to get funding and an 8-member film crew this past summer to film a documentary in the rainforest to tell the story. And fortunate not only to tell the story, but to be able to pay back Antonio thousands of dollars for doing that, partaking in that, and putting his name in the contract so that he'll get royalties from all of this. But that man that we saw, thank you, that man that we saw in the film is not free to practice shamanism. His job in the rainforest is one of curator of an ethnobotanical garden. That's what he does for a living, and it's a fine living. He's been living in the jungle, working around this sort of work for the past 30 years. Very stable work for a Peruvian male. But because it's owned by an international conservancy group, they do not want shamanic healings to be performed on the grounds for liability reasons. So from their perspective, he can't do this. So they like him to be the shaman because he's a great gardener. Talks to the plants and makes them all grow bigger and better and stronger and more powerful. And he can tell the stories, but he's not free to practice. So in some sense, his freedom has become my freedom. Meaning I would love nothing more than to see him have, to start with, a little piece of primal rainforest where he is able to carry on this practice and pass it on to his oldest son, Hilmer, the gentleman that you saw in the film as well. Pass it on to his middle daughter, Mercy, myself, and some of those of you that would like to share the path as well. So the point of the matter is, in the most minuscule way, in our small story is the whole story. It's not about only helping Don Antonio and his family. It's about helping all of us, because it's the rainforest for all of us. And we must feel it within. Simply, we haven't eaten enough rainforest bars. The point of the matter is that La Selva Conservancy, last year we took a group down to the rainforest so they could see and experience that. We filmed the documentary. This year I'm here. We'll put the documentary together, get the message out on a more global scene here, and spread the word. But ours is not the only word. There are many, many, many other rainforest and conservancy groups that are represented here or that you're already members of. What I'm here to say is you have an obligation. If you were to journey into your heart, into your dreams, journey to the ayahuasca vine, whatever moves you, you would surely feel that energy resonating. And you would feel the necessity to take action. It's like love. Love is a verb, not a noun. We've heard these stories before, but the point of the matter is, it's time, and this group has gathered here now. One of the reasons that this audience is here in North America, I truly believe, is because these are the can-do people. We have technology, we have commerce, we have a lot of scientific and commercial and business know-how that the indigenous don't necessarily have. They have the spiritual aspects and the plants that we need. You know, every once in a while, for those of us who haven't had the experience of the rainforest, go there. I truly believe that it's a necessity to be bathed in an overdose of nature, to be absolutely polluted with it in a good sense, because it truly changed your vibrational level. Absolutely being in it. That is the medicine. And when we go down there to do our work, the first thing we do often is just be silent and walk in the rainforest. It's in the air. You can feel it. You know, we all know if we drink something, 45 minutes later, something's going to happen. But the subtleties of it and the profundity with the feelings that you have of that vibrational frequency are absolutely astounding. So those of you who have not had the pleasure of meeting Mother Nature on that level, I suggest you take a trip down there. You know, when I first started going into the rainforest, I thought, you know, now that I've discovered this place, we can close the gates because I'm here. But the bottom line, and I thought, well, maybe we shouldn't bring, you know, the issue has come up before earlier today. Maybe we shouldn't be bringing hordes of people down there to trample it. But the bottom line is, that's the only way you can make the connection. It's the only way you can make the connection is by breathing its breath, by eating its plants and becoming one with it, by drinking its waters. It's truly an amazing experience, just that alone. And for those of us that run down right away, where is the ayahuasca on the corner? You know what? Wait. Just wait. Give yourself the experience of the rainforest just like it is. And then when you open to it, it really truly is fantasia. Veritable Disneyland for adults. It's really an amazing experience. So what I'm here to say is just to call upon each and every one of you to sink into your hearts and into that energy that's already flowing in your veins and ask it what would be the appropriate part that you need to play, for there are many parts to play in all of this. Certainly on a medicinal level, on a medical level, as I said, pharmaceuticals come from the rainforest. It's a short jaunt from our corner rainforests and shamans who know of the uses of the medicinal plants to our corner pharmacies. So it's absolutely vital on that level. And it's vital on the level for those of us who do this work, for it's a very different experience in the primal rainforest. And that is where that very strong energy comes from. I believe that the plants who live there have to compete because there's more numbers, more varieties, more predators. Their energies are very much more powerful. Their medicines are more powerful. Their spiritual medicines of ayahuasca, their pharmaceutical medicines of curare, quinine, and so forth. So this is one of invoking the call within and finding a place or staying open to that place. And something will come, somebody's story, somebody's conservancy group, somebody's rainforest action, whatever it is, that will speak to you to join in wholeheartedly and do your part. When we come together and do medicine together, you know, that's a relationship. When we share medicine with each other, that it never, our relationship is so much deeper. It's never the same. We can look in each other's eyes and see each other's souls when we share medicine together. And the point of the matter is, it is like that with the rainforest, just walking in it and sharing that kind of medicine. We become one. And so following that same sort of theme, I just urge you to stay open this afternoon to everybody's input and find the place where your heart feels most called to do something. And it's in the action, the proof is in the pudding, and so thank you.
Thank you, Connie. And now we'll hear from Jeremy Narby, who's worked with the local indigenous population there in detail, and I'm sure has a few great comments to give us.
Thanks. Okay. Standing up for the people in the back, because that way you don't have to strain your neck so much. The School for Bilingual education, bilingual intercultural education that's run by the Federation of Indigenous Organizations of the Peruvian Amazon with 3 molecular biologists recently, as I told you yesterday. And we walked around the compound, which is out by a lake surrounded by forest, but not far from the Iquitos airport, so planes fly over it as you walk around the forest with the young Indians, who come from 15 different cultures, and they're there because they've been chosen by their people to come and learn how to teach in their own language and culture, and in Spanish and science. And as we walked around the compound, the scientists were oohing and eyeing at all the plants, because they have all these different plants planted around, and the young indigenous students were showing what they knew, and we actually followed them in their ecology class. It's quite interesting to have a Peruvian professor of ecology interacting with a 20-year-olds who are all from different tribes, Aguarugna, Ashaninka, Shipibo, and so on. And after this, we went back to a room to talk with this class, and they said, well, okay, we have some questions now. And one young guy said, well, what I'd like to know from one of the professors is, what is a cell? Because they take biology classes. So we all looked at the French professor, and well, the 3 scientists looked and agreed that he would be the one to get up there. And so he got up and gave a speech, a brilliant synthesis, all you've ever wanted to know about a cell in less than 10 minutes. And he talked about DNA and the nucleus and the proteins and mitochondria and so on, the membrane, And after he'd finished speaking, there was a question from a young woman at the back. And she said, what's the difference between DNA and RNA? Except the French professor hadn't spoken of RNA. And these young indigenous people this was at the end of the 20th century at the time, 6 months ago, they're asking questions like my neighbors would ask in Switzerland, what is the difference between DNA and RNA? So the world has become a global place. The frontiers between us and them and Westerners and indigenous peoples, things are shifting fairly quickly. And these people, the choice that they've made, they've realized correctly, I think, that to survive as societies, as cultures, they have to graft on to their culture and society the global culture, what we used to call Western culture not so long ago. And so they've made a deliberate choice, conservation through transformation. So there's a kind of a paradoxical signature there to the strategy. About what Jose said about indigenous people who seem to be forgetting their traditions, I think that there's a time for forgetting and a time for remembering. And at the school that I'm talking about, there, the Witoto people have young people there and an old specialist who's there. And he said that he stood up, and we also had a meeting with the scientists and the old specialists, and so he stood up, and part of what he said was that the Witoto had come originally from Colombia, and that they had ran away from the genocide that was going on there and had come to Peru, so they'd been uprooted and had become refugees in the Peruvian Amazon at the beginning of the 20th century. So great, and running away from genocide, these people, had been tortured on a massive scale, and you can read about it in Michael Tossig's book that was mentioned previously, Shamanism, Colonialism, and the Wild Man, a study in healing and terror. And it's a rather atrocious book in certain parts when it gets to how the rubber tappers treated the Witoto. And so these people had a reason to want to forget the past. At this school, what the man said was that he thanked this program because until they had started participating in it 7 years ago, he would never even have dreamed that it would be possible to recover. Now it's time for the Witoto to remember. And he said that they'd done about 50%. That was his estimation. And they're making teaching materials so that the young teachers who are being trained to teach Witoto and global in Witoto and in Spanish, so they can go back and teach the future generations in Witoto and in Spanish. So these people are engaged in a process now of documenting themselves. And I think this is an important process to help them document themselves. There's been good ethnography that's been done also, fortunately, by anthropologists like Reichel Dolmatov, like Jean-Pierre Chaumet, like Luis Luna, who's here. But each anthropologist has a specific people, vegetalistas in the Peruvian Amazon, or the Yagua in the case of Chaumet, or the Tucano de Sana for Reichel Dolmatov. But there are 400 indigenous societies speaking 400 languages in the Peruvian Amazon. So there's a lot of documenting that still needs to be done. There's a flyer out in the back for an organization called the Shamanic Conservancy that is involved precisely in working with indigenous groups at documenting their shamanic traditions. There's all manner of good projects. The Michael Harner's Foundation is also involved in similar activities. I think also it's not just a question of documenting the knowledge, but also projects that work with the local indigenous organizations at land titling and bilingual education. All this is land titles are not an indigenous concept. In fact, the idea that you could actually own land was wasn't an indigenous concept. Land wasn't for sale. But finally, in the world we live in, with all the ranchers coming in, finally they realized that you had to have titles to your land, otherwise you weren't going to survive. So all these things are about change. It's not just about conservation. I think the key to this is to work with these people and dialogue with them directly. The projects have to come out of the communities, and so to be able to help them, help yourselves, help themselves, you have to be there and talk with them and understand their language. It implies also a kind of bilingualism, not just on their side, but also on our side. And it doesn't just mean speaking Spanish, it also means being able to understand their logic while keeping our own. Cognitivism are never easy things to obtain, but bilinguals have more fun.
Thank you very much. I'll attest to that last statement. So I'll do the same. Okay. Well, I have just several points that I'm going to say a few words briefly. When the first time I took ayahuasca, yagé, in Colombia, I asked Don Apolinar, well, what happened? Well, first, you have heard some of you the story, but I will repeat it. First, I met Terence, and he talked me about it. Yagé. I'm from the Amazon, but I was not interested. I mean, I've never heard of it. And when Terence told me about that, then I talked to my father, and my father said, "Oh, but Apolinar, do you remember Apolinar? He knows about that." So I went to see Apolinar, and then I asked him, "Okay, I want to learn about this. What shall I do?" He said, "Well, you have to take Yagé. Well, you have to keep this diet. You have to come to live with me. You have to keep this diet, take ayahuasca 40 nights, and after 40 nights, then Yagé will come." And I said, and how he looks like? So he's a little man, he's simpatico. Okay. And then I was asking, okay, and what do you do? I mean, what is it for?
He said, with Yahe you see all this animalero that is out there, all those animals that are out there. And then I saw, the connection. Okay, in my personal life, okay, I was born in the Amazon, but then educated in Bogota, and then I went to Spain, and then so on. And I only discovered the rainforest through ayahuasca. It was my own experience with ayahuasca. Suddenly I said, wow, my people, they have this knowledge, and then through that I understood. And of course, ayahuasca needs the forest. It's a product of the forest. It grows in the forest, and as we know, ayahuasca is only one of the many, many different plants. By the way, something that I wanted to say yesterday, and I forgot that. Remember, those people who are doing ayahuasca and practicing it. Remember that we are only ayahuasqueritos. We are just only little ayahuasqueros. There are many other plants. And Don Emilio said, my teacher was telling me that. Remember, ayahuasca is a vine, but it needs big trees to, so we need to learn more about those trees. And so we need the forest to learn. It's an infinite path of knowledge. Then I wanted just to comment about this ayahuasca tourism and all this. I see it, it's both ways. Okay, on the one hand, you can buy a bottle of ayahuasca in Iquitos for $20. Of course, you don't know who prepared it and how well and what was the intention and all this. And I will never touch the thing, But on the other hand, I've been also. I was working very much in the Iquitos area from 1980 to 85. Then I got very much involved with Pablo Maringo and the School of Painting, and I dedicated 8 years of my life to this project. It was a conservationist project through the arts. That the kids go to the forest, paint the forest, and they did incredible work. Only that the project was not sustainable because simply it was too much work for me, and then at the end, this is very tricky, all of these financial things in the Amazon. At the end I have 300 people waiting, that I will produce the money for all of them, and it was impossible, so I have to give up. Although the school is still, low key, but it's still existing. Anyway. I left Iquitos. I didn't go back until several years later. It was a couple of years ago that Dennis and Francisco Montes and Pablo Maringo, that we were invited to a seminar, and suddenly I discovered this ayahuasca tourism. Nowadays you go to Iquitos and you go to any travel agency and then you see, bird watching, piranha fishing, and then ayahuasquero and this and that is just part of the program, And every lodge around, they have their own ayahuasqueros, So, but the interesting thing is that you could see small botanical gardens around these lodges, and that is very important, because that didn't exist before. So around this ayahuasca tourism is also growing a little, industry of plant, extracts and all that, and that means that are recovering somehow their own knowledge, and because of money. Okay, but that's very important. So I see that this ayahuasca tourism, it can be interesting as well. I think that it's doing good things, and many of you, I myself, I'm born in the Amazon, but without the gringo that went there, I would not know about the Amazon. And sometimes people who criticize this tourism, they have been there, be taking ayahuasca and everything, So how can we deny other people of going there if we went there? So there is two ways. The other thought that came to me is that I think that it's very important when we take ayahuasca or any of these brews to know where it comes from and to be responsible, so that that this ayahuasca comes from a good source, and that it is not simply cut. They are not killing the plants; that it is being harvested, and that there is, that it's going back. And the thought came to me that, in a way, all of us who are interested in ayahuasca and other plants, we have to pay royalties back to the Amazon in one way or another. I'm not talking about percentages of this, but I think it's very important to get somehow engaged into some kind of conservationist project. But we have to also learn how it works, because not all of them work well. Sometimes at the disaster. For instance, when I was in Iquitos, there was a lot of resentment about Americans or Europeans buying land for preservation. because for them it was tourism. They are just buying land, they are not using it. What is this? They have the right to buy because they have money, and they need the forest, they need to cut the trees, because they make the living in this way and so on. So it's not so easy. You have to, therefore, what Jeremy was saying is very important. You have to get in touch with communities, and you put your input, but let them, guide the things, because they know best, how to work with it. Yeah, and I was comment to Connie. When I was with the Shipibo, I was a month keeping the diet, and I was interested in the plants, and I had my wanted to do collection, plant collections and so on, and I was so disappointed in the beginning because I was taking ayahuasca and all these sessions, there were no plants at all. And I asked, Don Basilio, where are the plants? And he said, well, if you know the song of a plant, you don't need the plant. So there is the opposite, They don't use the plant if they don't really, So they go, they do the diet, they learn the songs from the spirits of the plants, and they said in the song, is the essence of the plant. So they do the healing with the song. Only if the song doesn't work, then they have to go to the forest and harvest the plant. So it's really interesting that it's the opposite, idea, but, Okay, and then while doing field work in Brazil, I noticed how many of the people of the UDP and the Santo Daime, urban people from Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, etc., how they have changed. Many of them have changed their attitudes. Many of them are now into natural products. They were doing all sorts of business and they became, or they went to the forest. I mean, many people in São Paulo, or Rio, I meet people, or Salvador, any of these large cities, going to the Amazon to have the experience of the forest itself. And there has been a lot of education about the forest through ayahuasca in the cities. So I think that in that respect, ayahuasca has been a very good teacher. A lot of urban people have learned about the Amazon in this way. And in the Santo Daime, as Alex was telling this morning, is an ecological religion. So it's deeply, into the world of the plants. And Mapia, some of you may have been there. The spiritual center is in the forest, and now there. I think that Padrino Alfredo has been moving even deeper into the forest because the religion is very much connected to the forest. So I think that there is this natural connection. Yeah. Well, I think that this is it. Okay, those some comments.
Thank you, Luis Eduardo. Well, the idea now is to sort of open the time for general questions, and usually what happens is everybody's silent for the first 5 minutes, and then we'll get a flood of questions and remarks and so forth, and we'll open the floor and see if you want to question anybody, and if so, you may want to question one panelist in particular. So we'll start.
I just want to take...
Excuse me just a minute. Our friend is changing tapes, and everything is controlled by modern technology here. We're close to Hollywood, and they command. The classic joke in the Amazon is the tourist lands in Iquitos and says, yes, please, please.
Not working.
Yes,
is it working? Okay. Yeah, one thing that I forgot is the theme of transformation. Transformation is one of the main themes in ayahuasca, and it's interesting, that there is a way of learning from the Amazon, and that is different, completely different way of talking about objectivity and subjectivity and so on. That for us is to detach, the object, of our study, and if we study ourselves, we put ourselves as an object. In the Amazon, the idea is totally opposite. It's that if you want to learn something about something, you become that. You know, you just go into, you want to learn about the bird, then you become the bird. You see the world through the bird, and this and ayahuasca makes this possible. You know, and I have I've had people taking ayahuasca from many different cultures, and you know, and this theme happens again and again. It's very interesting, I think. Okay.
The joke, yes, Hollywood. Well, the classic story, American tourist lands in Iquitos and immediately asks, where can I find a wild Indian to go take ayahuasca? And then the answer is, oh, but you come to the wrong place. It's not in Iquitos, it's Hollywood. You find so, first question.
Eduardo alluded to it just a few minutes ago, and we didn't actually get a chance to talk about it this morning. But I'd like to just share briefly with you the model that we in the Santo Daime community, and especially in Mapia, are using to address exactly this issue. And up until the 90s, the Daime community is very much limited to Mapia and various few places in Brazil, and it wasn't such an issue until the expansion outward started in the early 90s. And when we saw that there was such an incredible interest, we immediately thought, oh, we need to protect the plants and we need to start a reforestation project in that way. And so we became a very conscious effort to start replanting the jugubi and replanting the hyena so that we would have a consistent source, and created an organization called Daime Eterno so that we would always have daime. And then as the expansion continued out for about 7 years, and in 1997, Padrino Alfredo received a spiritual order that the expansion was to move out of the first world and back into the rainforest, and that using all the resources, both the financial resources and the resources in the brother and sisterhood that was created, that we would use those resources to bring them back into the forest. And that the idea was to procure land to create conservation projects and conserve the land, and then to begin to bring the people together. And so the first place we started was in the Rio Juruá area, which is where Padrino Sebastian and Padrino Alfredo was born. And what we're doing there is to create a model community for 10 more communities that we want to build. And so what we've done is we're buying as much land as we can in the area, and we're bringing the people that are 5 days apart. We start in Cruzeiro do Sul, and it's 5 days essentially by boat to get into the inner Seringal where we're going. And it's just this amazing, beautiful thing that's happening, is that through the development of this project in the forest, we're uniting the people all the way from Cruzeiro do Sul into the forest, people who have not necessarily had connections, people who have not necessarily been connected, but are being joined in this effort to rebuild this community that once actually existed in this place. And so they're beginning to share their resources. They're building little churches along the way, so that when we travel, there's always little churches and there's homes and little communities that we can go to on the way. And the idea is to bring together the people who have been sort of left destitute and stranded from the collapse of the rubber industry, and the people who kind of just ended up there, to bring them together into community, to give them health, new health plans, to give them education, to bring the doctrine to them, and to create ecologically and economically viable ways for them to remain in the forest. So to create extractivist reserves, to do kind of selective rare woods, this kind of things that give them a sustainable way to remain in the forest. And once there's a way that these people can live in the forest, they will become the natural guardians of the forest. And so when there's a population there that has as their best interest to live in the forest, they will become the defenders of the forest. So in Mapia, we have an expression that people say that the queen of the forest is bringing forth this medicine to preserve herself. And I think the interest that's shown here and the place that we have on our hearts is a pretty good reflection of that.
This question is probably mostly for Jose, but anybody else who could answer it. it was mentioned earlier, and of course in many anthropology books, that it was believed that the shaman or the vegelito was merely someone who was insane but incorporated into society. Obviously, that's not true. But what my question is what does a shaman or a vegelito do when a patient comes to them who is going off onto a fringed area of loco and cabasa? Insanity.
Going off into a fringe area mentally, you mean?
Yeah, mentally.
Yeah.
A mentally insane patient. Wanted for about 10 years. It's nowhere in any books.
Voy a hablar desde mi punto de vista, de mi experiencia. Por la cantidad de palos que he tomado, ¿no? Yo solo a veces invoco las fuerzas de los palos. Entonces esos espíritus vienen y lo trabajan, nada más. Y a veces me llaman los paleros, el palero, el ayahuasquero, bueno, y con eso se puede hacer nada más con eso, ¿no?
Well, he says that in my experience, what I do is I invoke the spirits of the plants, not only that of ayahuasca, but the others, to come and do the healing and do the adjustment in that person's mind. And that's the best way I can explain it, that I invoke those spirits to come down and heal that person and do whatever is needed to retain or put them back in a balanced state. And that's the only way I could describe it.
I'd like to make a comment too, just as once again, a personal story. As part of the finishing of the filming of the documentary, the last week was filmed bringing Don Antonio to San Francisco. And so we had lined up some Americans to be healed while he was here as part of the filming. And several of them were just folks like you and I who just wanted a general healing. But one of them was a psychiatric patient, his treating psychiatrist and his mother. Now, I did not tell Don Antonio that we were going to have a patient of that nature. But when he first came to town, day number 2 or 3 it was, we went into San Francisco to ride the trolley cars and to have that whole experience. And as soon as we got off the ferry from Marin to San Francisco, there was a crazy man on the street corner. And unannounced, Don Antonio said, "Is that man crazy?" And I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, I think he is, and the point of it is, physicians do not understand that's a spiritual problem. He's got bad spirits." I didn't say a word. I thought, well, we might have some luck then when we bring on the psychiatric patient. So we had been treating and filming, and all of a sudden it was time for this psychiatric patient and treating psychiatrist and mother to arrive. And as they walked into my home, suddenly Antonio backed up and really eyed this man and got it right away, absolutely saw it energetically. And he took a look at him and he said, "You in the shower now." And he turned to me and he said, "Connie, don't you see all the heat's in his head? Can you feel it?" After the shower was over, Antonio took his shikapa and sang the plant songs, invoking the healing plant spirits, used the tobacco and gave him a limpia, a cleansing herbal bath, and immediately his energy changed and he calmed down. Then he gave him some dietary restrictions and kind of gave him a lesson in matters of the heart about paying attention to his mother and staying connected, and that part of it was his responsibility. And he said, "I want to see you again tomorrow." Well, when the next day came, this young patient didn't want to come back. It was that opening, and what had happened was a little bit too much for him to handle. But his mother and the treating psychiatrist came back for other reasons. And the point of the matter is that the mother reported after the healing with the limpia, the tobacco, the energy transference that I was talking about yesterday, without the use of ayahuasca, that patient was calmed down. He did not smoke one cigarette for the next 24 hours and had been a chain smoker as a way of self-medicating, took several naps during the afternoon, and his energy level was completely calm. His mother reported that for the first time, she felt that her son had listened to a healer or physician. Her son was unable to make that connection, lost in his own world. And I just suspect that somebody like that within their own culture and being treated by the shaman would have been caught earlier on in theory and not gotten as far into his disease state, maybe not have required all of that heavy medication, and with repeated exposure to the calming rhythms and the plant spirits and the dietary restrictions, if he had been living with a shaman or someone had restricted his diet, that it could have been possible to maintain the control of that patient's inevitable disease state there. And that part of it's just simply a conjecture. I don't know. But all I know is what I saw and what his mother reported. And the treating psychiatrist said that he's just down to one medication now. Now, that doesn't mean we don't know what that means. I'm not implying anything, but I'm simply stating it's very interesting indeed. Good question.
Thank you.
Tengo una pregunta por el señor Campos. ¿Sabes usted, señor, que hay mucha gente en los Estados Unidos que toman el ayahuasca sin ayuda de Santo Daime y UTD, sin ayahuasquero? Quiero saber su opinión. ¿Cree usted que esta medicina siempre nos va a ayudar?
Yeah, the question is directed to Jose, and the question is, do you know that in the States many people are taking ayahuasca without belonging to a Santo Daime or UDV group, or without an ayahuasquero, doing it on their own? And the question is, do you think whether that is helpful or not?
No puedo contestar esa pregunta. Muchas gracias.
He says that he can't answer that question, that he's unable to answer that question. Of course, for whatever it's worth, to put my 2 cents in, I mean, ayahuasca is generally considered there in the Peruvian Amazon and in a group experience. It's always a group experience. And I believe I'm right if I say that most ayahuasqueros would say that it is not advisable to you to go home and just take a dose, because that violates the whole healing experience, which takes place in the context of a group, in the context of a person leading it. So that taking ayahuasca just on your own would not be recommendable. Now, it is true that an ayahuasquero in training, or people that are working deeply with the substance, will go out in the jungle and take ayahuasca by themselves, but that's not the populace in general. Is there any other, any of you would like to answer that question, or any further? I guess not. Or do you?
He wants to talk, but he doesn't.
Well, he challenged me to say something. I can't resist a challenge from Luis Luna, even though I dread the question, because it has to do with individual freedom, and who am I to tell another human being what they got to do. And I don't live in the United States, and I mean, it's a fantastic country, very interesting. Here we are, I love SF, and even NY a little bit, but it's a pretty weird country too. And there's been some paranoia around this conference about DEH and stuff like that. I mean, in Switzerland, it's a completely different scene, and it's a direct democracy, and the sovereign is the people, and they're going to be voting pretty soon on decriminalizing hemp and so on. It's a different game. When I look in on Americans, so there's a war on drugs here. But this is politics. I don't want to get involved in American politics. I'm a Canadian, and I live in Switzerland, I'm a free man. But I honor the First Amendment of the American Constitution. But, dear American friends, what's going on here? Is this a country of free speech or what? I mean, how come it's so, I thought this was the country of freedom, but yet there's all this kind of paranoia and war going on. I mean, it must be hard, so get organized and do something about it.
I would like to just comment, too, to keep the discussion going in our hearts. And once again, all we can talk from is personal experience.
Thank you.
And certainly, set and setting being something we've talked about here, an experienced guide makes the experience richer, deeper. It's easier to let go. The more powerful the shaman, the deeper the experience. In some sense, if you believe all of that I don't think what I'm trying to say here from the get-go is I don't think this is, in my opinion, a right or a wrong, yes or a no question, whether doing it singly is right or wrong. But it might be one of a different kind of experience and the quality therein. So, you're all free to decide that for yourselves, I think.
I just wanted to finish my thing, okay?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. No, but it's fine. I'll just I'll finish my thing. You don't mind. Yeah. So being a more or less free man, that was in quotes. Being a free man, and having the privilege of going to the Peruvian Amazon regularly, and knowing qualified indigenous ayahuasqueros, and having written the book that I've written, I've got a direct access to, I think, doing ayahuasca in optimal conditions, at least as far as I'm concerned. And I don't want to take even good ayahuasca in a suitcase back with me to Switzerland. I think that taking ayahuasca is like being a pilot in the Concorde, and I'm not an airplane pilot, And however, if I do want to do some work with plants that stimulate my mind, psychoactive plants, there are plants in my environment in Switzerland, psilocybin mushrooms in particular, that grow. And in fact, according to Swiss law, if you get down on your knees and chew them out of the grass, you're not breaking the law. Breaking the law consists of picking them, and then you are holding a substance, but then even then it only comes down to a parking ticket, unless you make a big commerce of it. So what I fail to understand in the ayahuasca right here without ayahuasquero scene, even though each person is allowed to do as she pleases, is why not concentrate a bit more on the things that are easily available? And the nice things about mushrooms, for instance, is that you can chew one, or you can chew two, or you can chew four, and it's easier to. It's like a shallower pool into which you can get to know things. So that's my point of view, and I've stood up to your challenge.
Of course, you realize we're touching upon a deliciously controversial subject, which is, if you carry this thought to the extreme, and I'm not taking sides, by this same thought, you should only be able to take mushrooms in Mexico, and you should only take kava in Hawaii, and you should only take blah, blah, blah. And, you have to go to a Swiss lab to take LSD. So, so this brings up all kinds of delicious questions that we won't go into right now, and we'll take the next one.
Thank you. We started out the weekend talking and exploring ayahuasca, and we are finishing with protecting the rainforest and conserving. And I would like to expand our awareness just one step further than that. I've been involved in rainforest conservation and particularly rainforest medicinal herbs from the Amazon. But the word rainforest really encircles the world at the equator. And I want to remind us that there is a rainforest in the African Congo, in the Far East, in Malaysia, in Puerto Rico, El Yunque, and in our own Olympic Peninsula. And that there is a great urgency to protect all of the rainforests because they are our lungs. Mm-hmm. And if the rainforests are gone and our lungs are gone, all of this is a moot point. So I just wanted to remind us and speak for all of the other plants in the rainforest as a whole. Thank you.
On that note, Connie, you spoke something that was very intriguing in regard to the force is in our blood. Mm-hmm. And you're more right than you know. Well, I sequenced DNA for the Genome Project, and it is an incredible landscape. But what we've got going on is the march of the bioindustrial complex into that landscape. We've got a land grab going on. We've got patents being issued for this, that, and the other as fast as it can be sequenced, and the people don't even know what the heck the DNA does. It's just that they have enough money to buy a sequencing machine. Now, the march, we talk about, we're going to buy our rainforest crunch bars and save the rainforest. Save the forest in here. I mean, we can't have tobacco ads on the television, and yet we've got these pharmaceutical companies. Ooh, do you feel a little bit ill? Try Xanax, Prozac, yada, 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 yada. We've got this entire consciousness manipulating machine hell-bent on saying, no, you will look at the world in this manner. And we talk about indigenous people not knowing the nature of intellectual property, but we're saying, well, once we start taking our land and knowing how to use it in your terms, then we'll be okay. I don't think so. Because it gets down to the basis of intellectual property. We say we don't believe in spirits in the West. What the heck is intellectual property? When I'm talking about a dancing linear crystalline molecule that's no one's ever seen, touched, tasted, or heard, except for maybe the ayahuasquero. I think it's your intellectual property. And I think that a lot of this knowledge has to come flying into our realm, our economy. We vote on the basis of, oh yes, we've got an economic expansion. Well, that economy needs a place into which to expand. And yes, we're down at the frontier and we're saying, okay, the rainforest is about to disappear because this economy is marching forward and it needs free stuff. It needs mother. It needs nurture. It needs untapped areas. So we're taking the rainforest. Well, you know what? The people are already thinking ahead of the game. They're like, well, there's this space, this three-dimensional space that everyone we've sold to you, we believe in that. We don't believe in anything else besides that. And we're running out of that. Where are we going to grow the economy next? Ooh, there's this infinitely enfolded space within each and every one of us, and I can grab that land, I can buy it up, and I can be the landlord, and I can charge rent to whomever wants to come around and do a drug, because the only real drugs are the ones that we can synthesize in a lab, because heaven forbid you take it from a forest, or heaven forbid you take it from a plant, because, those indigenous people, they know nothing. I've got a PhD in biochemistry, and I can build this big lab. Sorry, I'm a little worked up here, but I feel very, very strongly that the action that we need to take can be local, can be political, can be where do you choose your medicine? Who do you choose? What direction do you expand your economy? In what manner do we do it out here, right here and now, because the forest is in our blood and in our consciousness.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear your comments in that regard, because it is very much close to my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. So we had a statement. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank all of you and just have two quick comments. As far as local political action goes, I just wanted to do a little advertisement for a group that I used to work for here in California. It's called Forests Forever. And yeah, my belly button also takes donations. No, but they're a great organization who has a lot of legislation going to protect specifically California's forests. So if you do live in California, I urge you to check them out, www.forestforever.org. And the second thing was when you were talking about this ayahuasca tourism, I just wanted to urge any of you or anyone in the audience who does seem to have, I'd hope, more of a respect for the set and setting and the sacredness of ayahuasca, I'd encourage you to start taking ayahuasca tourism trips down there and organizing them so we can, buck the tide, and it won't be this cliche, horrible American go down there and drink your Coca-Cola and your thing at the corner store, but, organize some trips down there where you teach people the respect for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Hello, I have a question for all of you. I didn't catch any names of organizations that are particularly successful in conservancy in the rainforest in the Peru, Colombia, Ecuadorian area. Jeremy, you talked about your group. I'm wondering, can a couple of you give us 2 or 3 organizations that we can donate to? I have my pen ready. Okay. Okay, that's one. Okay.
I guess there's no individual response here. I guess we don't know of any particularly. Maybe you do?
Yeah. I didn't come here to take your money, so there's a lot of organizations that are doing a lot of good work. I think to name any one in particular, and you can look into it according to what really interests you, and I don't feel like beating my own drum any more than I've already done, or beating anybody else's precise drum. But there's a whole web out there of NGOs and local NGOs. One way to do it, if you're really motivated, is to go down to Peru or Ecuador or choose the country, because each country is a different island in that sense, and inquire. The Rainforest Action Network has a book out that was put out by Glenn Switkus and Monty Aguirre about 7 years ago, and I think it's called Voices of the Rainforest Amazonia. It's a brochure of NGOs that are involved in rainforest conservation and indigenous peoples. And so, and then go and check them out. Don't just send them checks.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm very small. I am from Ecuador, from the Andes Mountains, and I'm working with a network of 10 communities. So if the lady who wants to know, this is an organization that's not an NGO. There are 10 communities that are working 9 years with this beautiful project to protect the rainforest. They work with, it's like a ecotourism project, but all the money they get from that project, they have for schools, they have for the children, and to protect their land, that they're gaining a lot of land because the Indian movement in Ecuador is very powerful, and they gain a lot of rights these past 10 years. So they get back without buying, just because there's their own land, a lot of acreage. So if you are interested, I can connect you directly with these people, and then you can go and look by yourself to see what you think about that beautiful project that they're done by themselves.
Wonderful, thank you. You ought to connect with a person that spoke before. Maybe we ought to stick to ayahuasca here more than anything else. And
okay, this is connected. Eduardo, I'm a breath worker, and you have done. I'm sorry, I'm a breath worker, and you have done work with ayahuasca and breath work combined, and I'd be interested to hear your feelings about that. And actually, in a related way, Jose had said yesterday that one of the plant groups that he works with are heart-opening plants, and that would seem to have a bearing on that, the possibility of the heart opening from breath work. And I'd be interested to, if Jose has, or maybe Connie, a little more knowledge of that.
Okay, well, yes, I have done two workshops in the Peruvian Amazon with somebody who was trained with Stan Groff, and it worked very well together. We have 10 days, and we have 3 ayahuasca sessions and 3 breathwork sessions. And it was very, very good, very, very successful work. You go deeper and deeper, and they were just like combining perfectly well. This year we are going to have a workshop, but not with breathwork, but we are going to combine science, lectures, but then with the arts. And Kat Harrison is going to do botanical illustration, and Pablo Maringo is going to teach. So we are trying to use different techniques, but I think that ayahuasca goes well with many different techniques. So yeah,